I never thought I'd be nothing more than a stepping stone in my own marriage. That revelation came on an ordinary Tuesday evening when I arrived home early from a business trip that unexpectedly wrapped up a day ahead of schedule. I wanted to surprise her. How ironic that turned out to be. As I quietly entered our home, I heard her laughing in the kitchen. That melodic sound I'd fallen in love with years ago. She was on the phone, speaking freely, unaware of my presence. "He's just a stepping stone," she said between chuckles. "Once I get the promotion next month, I won't need his connections anymore." My blood ran cold as she continued. "I've been playing the devoted wife for 3 years now." His family name opened all the right doors. I stood frozen in the hallway, my gift bag dangling uselessly from my fingers. The necklace inside, the one I'd spent hours selecting at the airport, suddenly felt like a pathetic token. Was this what our marriage had been reduced to? A business transaction I wasn't even aware I'd signed? Her sister must have said something on the other end because she laughed again. "No, don't worry. He has no idea. Men like him never do. They're so eager to believe a woman loves them that they miss all the signs." Each word cut deeper than the last. I'd built my life around this woman, restructured my career to support her ambitions, even moved across the country because she wanted to be closer to her industry connections. Carefully, I retreated to the front door, opened it loudly, and called out, "Honey, I'm home early." The performance that followed was sickening. She rushed to greet me, all smiles and embraces, quickly ending her call with a fabricated "Gotta go, my love just got home." The endearment that once warmed my heart now turned my stomach. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying years of memories through this new, horrifying lens. The convenient timing of her interest in me shortly after my promotion, her sudden enthusiasm about my family's business connections, the strategic way she'd integrated herself into my professional circles. It had all been calculated. For the next week, I maintained a perfect facade. I smiled, kissed her goodbye each morning, and pretended nothing had changed. Meanwhile, I began my investigation. Her password-protected laptop wasn't actually secure. She'd used my birthday as her password, another cruel irony. Inside, I found emails to her sister detailing her plans, spreadsheets tracking my useful contacts, and a timeline for her career advancement that eerily aligned with major milestones in our relationship. The woman I'd built my life around had been playing me from the start. I thought about confronting her immediately, letting rage and hurt dictate my response. But something deeper took hold, a cold, calculated resolve. If I was nothing but a stepping stone to her, then I would ensure it was the last one she'd ever use to climb over someone. I began making calls of my own, quietly securing my assets, documenting everything I'd found. I contacted a lawyer friend, ensuring she wouldn't get a penny more than legally required. I started reconnecting with old friends she'd subtly encouraged me to distance myself from. Most importantly, I began rebuilding the identity I'd compromised for her benefit. All the while, she noticed nothing amiss, so convinced of her control over me that she couldn't see the foundation crumbling beneath her feet. That's the thing about stepping stones. They only work when they stay exactly where you put them. I was done being still. It was time to let her fall alone. The next 3 weeks became my silent investigation. Each discovery was another crack in the foundation of what I thought was our life together. I started with her email accounts, not just the one I knew about, but 3 others she'd kept hidden. The extent of her deception was methodical, stretching back to before we'd even married. "He's the perfect mark," she'd written to her sister just 2 weeks after we began dating. "His family has connections to every major player in the industry. I just need to make him fall in love with me." Reading those words, I felt physically ill. The woman who had wiped away my tears at my father's funeral had been calculating her next career move even then. I discovered calendar entries for networking opportunities that coincided with dates she'd claimed to be working late. Photos shared between her and her sister showed her at cocktail parties with industry executives, events she'd never mentioned to me. In one particularly damning email, she'd laid out a 5-year plan that used my industry contacts as stepping stones to position herself for an executive role. The most revealing discovery came in a folder labeled Anniversary Ideas. Instead of romantic plans, it contained a detailed strategy for leveraging my upcoming promotion to advance her career. There were even contingency plans if I somehow failed to secure the position. Our anniversary had been nothing but another deadline in her professional calendar. I needed to understand the full scope of her betrayal, so I began tracking the trajectory of her career alongside our relationship milestones. Each of her promotions followed a careful exploitation of contacts I had introduced her to. The job she currently held, the one she had claimed to get on her own merit, had come directly from my college roommate's recommendation. Her manipulation extended beyond her career. She had systematically isolated me from friends who might have seen through her facade. "They're holding you back," she'd say, "or they don't respect what we're building together." In truth, they likely saw what I had been too blinded by love to recognize. I discovered credit card statements showing lavish lunches with her sister where they'd mockingly discussed my naivety. "He actually believes I'm working late," one text message read. "Meanwhile, I'm setting up meetings with the venture capital group he introduced me to last year. They're going to fund my side project. He has no idea." The side project she referred to was apparently a startup she planned to launch after securing her next promotion. The business plan on her laptop showed she intended to compete directly with my family's company, using proprietary knowledge she'd gleaned from our dinner conversations. With each revelation, my pain crystallized into something harder, more focused. I was no longer just hurt. I was resolved. I contacted my bank and began separating our finances, creating new accounts she couldn't access. I changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance and retirement accounts. I documented every piece of evidence meticulously, saving it all to a secure cloud account. At night, I'd lie awake beside her, watching her sleep peacefully, unaware that her carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. She'd reach for me in her sleep, and I'd have to resist the urge to recoil. The woman I'd once held with such tenderness now felt like a stranger. Worse, an enemy who had invaded my most intimate spaces. "How was your day, honey?" she'd ask each evening, her practiced smile never reaching her eyes. I'd respond with carefully crafted half-truths, mirroring the performance she'd been giving for years. My apparent ignorance was now my greatest weapon. While she thought I remained her unwitting stepping stone, I was quietly removing myself from beneath her feet. Planning my exit required the precision of a military operation. I couldn't afford a single misstep that might alert her to my knowledge or intentions. Each day became an exercise in strategic deception, a role I'd never imagined for myself, but one she had mastered long ago. My first move was securing legal representation. I met with 3 different divorce attorneys before selecting one known for handling high-profile separations with discretion. "This isn't uncommon," my lawyer said after reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. "But your documentation is exceptional. Most people in your situation act emotionally before collecting proof." That afternoon, I signed the paperwork to initiate proceedings that would remain sealed until I was ready. Financial independence was my next priority. I opened new accounts at a different bank, gradually transferring reasonable amounts that wouldn't trigger her suspicion. I monitored our joint accounts, documenting her spending patterns and noting how she'd been funneling money to a private account I wasn't supposed to know about. Rather than confront her, I used this information to adjust my own financial strategy. My career needed protection too. I scheduled private meetings with key business associates, carefully framing conversations to secure my professional standing without explicitly mentioning the coming separation. "I'm considering a restructuring of my personal and professional boundaries," I would say. "I value our relationship and want to ensure it continues regardless of any changes in my circumstances." Most understood the subtext, offering subtle support that confirmed my worth extended beyond being her husband. I found a furnished apartment across town, paying 6 months in advance and arranging for essential items to be delivered and stored. The lease was under an LLC I created through my lawyer, impossible to trace back to me. I selected a location she would never visit, the opposite direction from her preferred upscale neighborhoods. At home, I began digitizing important documents and securing irreplaceable personal items. Family photographs, heirlooms, and meaningful gifts from before our relationship were discreetly relocated to a safety deposit box. I took inventory of our household, documenting what we had purchased together versus what I had brought into the marriage. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy. Each morning kiss, each "I love you" exchange before bed was now part of an elaborate act. I attended her work functions, smiling proudly as she introduced me to people she hoped to impress. I watched her performance with new clarity, noting how her hand would linger on my arm when speaking to influential men, how she'd subtly mention my family connections when advantageous. Her upcoming promotion became the centerpiece of her conversations. Once this goes through, we'll finally be able to take that European vacation, she'd say, knowing I'd always wanted to visit my grandmother's homeland. The vacation was never the goal. It was merely the carrot she dangled to keep me motivated to help her advance. This time, I saw through it clearly. One evening, she mentioned a networking event scheduled for the following month. Your college friend will be there, the investment banker. Make sure you remind him how I helped with his charity gala last year. The calculated nature of her request turned my stomach, but I nodded agreeably. By the time that event occurred, her world would be unraveling. I began keeping a journal, documenting not just her manipulations, but my own emotional journey. This wasn't just about evidence anymore. It was about reclaiming my narrative. For too long, I had been a character in her story. Now I was writing my own. The most difficult moments came when genuine memories surfaced. Her comforting me after my promotion fell through 3 years ago. Her apparent excitement when I proposed. Had any of it been real? Or had each moment been carefully calculated to advance her agenda? The uncertainty itself was another form of betrayal. Exactly 1 month after overhearing that devastating phone call, my preparations were complete. My new life was arranged, my exit strategy flawless. All that remained was to deliver the news that would shatter the illusion she had worked so hard to maintain. On the surface, nothing had changed. I still kissed her goodbye each morning, still asked about her day each evening. But beneath that performance lay an unshakable truth. Her stepping stone had become quicksand, and she was about to sink. I chose a Thursday evening for the confrontation. Her promotion announcement was scheduled for the following Monday. Perfect timing to ensure she couldn't use my family connections to salvage the situation. I prepared the living room like a stage. Divorce papers on the coffee table, printed emails and text messages arranged in chronological order, and a glass of her favorite wine poured and waiting. When she walked through the door, her practiced smile faltered at the sight of me sitting calmly in the dimly lit room. "What's this?" she asked, her voice maintaining its usual warmth despite the confusion in her eyes. "A surprise?" "You could say that," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Please sit down. We need to talk." Her training as a manipulator was impressive. She immediately detected something was wrong and shifted tactics. She moved to sit beside me instead of across, placing her hand on my knee. "You seem upset. Whatever it is, we can work through it together, like we always do." I moved her hand away gently. "I'd prefer if you sat across from me for this conversation." A flash of irritation crossed her face before she complied, smoothing her skirt as she sat. "You're scaring me a little. What's going on?" 3 weeks ago, I came home early from my business trip. You were on the phone with your sister. I maintained steady eye contact as understanding dawned on her face. I heard everything. Her reaction was a masterclass in damage control. First came confusion, a perfectly executed furrow of her brow. "I don't understand what you mean. What did you hear that's upset you?" "He's just a stepping stone," I quoted. "That's what you called me. You outlined how you'd been using my connections, how you wouldn't need me after your promotion." She laughed. Actually laughed, though the sound was hollow. "Oh, that was nothing. Just silly sister talk. You know how we exaggerate to each other." She leaned forward, eyes widening in practiced sincerity. "You can't possibly think I meant any of that." I silently slid the first email across the table, her message to her sister from before our wedding, outlining how my family connections would advance her career. She read it, her face draining of color. "You went through my private emails?" Her voice shifted from warmth to indignation, her next calculated move. "That's a complete invasion of privacy. I can't believe you would." I cut her off by placing the second document before her, her 5-year plan with my name literally listed under assets to leverage. Then came the third, screenshots of texts mocking my naivety. With each piece of evidence, her facade cracked further until she sat silent, strategies exhausted. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. Cold, practical, assessing the damage. "What do you want? Money? More attention? What will it take to move past this?" She truly believed this was just another negotiation. "I want nothing from you," I said, sliding the divorce papers toward her. "Everything is outlined here. I've been more than fair with the financial arrangements. Panic flashed in her eyes. You can't be serious. After everything we've built, you're going to throw away 3 years over some out-of-context conversations. They seemed perfectly in context to me. I gestured to the evidence spread before us. Every milestone in our relationship aligned with a strategic move in your career. That's not coincidence. Her tactics shifted again, tears now, right on cue. I love you. Yes, I've been ambitious, and maybe I said things I shouldn't have, but that doesn't mean what we have isn't real. She reached for my hand. Please, we can go to counseling. I can show you how much you truly mean to me. I pulled my hand away. The promotion you're expecting on Monday isn't happening. Pure shock replaced the tears instantly. What do you mean? I spoke with the board last week. I explained that while I've always supported your career advancement, I could no longer in good conscience recommend someone who builds relationships solely for personal gain. Shock transformed into rage, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her. You had no right. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked for this? I have every idea. I've watched you work for it our entire marriage. Networking, manipulating, calculating each move. It was impressive, really. But it's over now. She stood abruptly, abandoning all pretense of reconciliation. This isn't over. You've made a serious mistake. Without me, you're nothing in this industry. I smiled calmly. That's where you're wrong. I was somebody long before you, and I'll be somebody long after. The only person who needed a stepping stone was you. Her eyes darted around the room as reality settled in. Where will I go? You can't expect me to just leave tonight. Your sister's address is listed as an alternate temporary residence in the papers, unless you'd prefer a hotel. The shock on her face was palpable. I had anticipated every move in her playbook before she made it. The stepping stone had not only shifted, it had completely disappeared from beneath her feet. The weeks following our confrontation revealed dimensions of her character I hadn't anticipated, despite everything I'd discovered. She didn't leave quietly as I'd expected. Instead, she launched a calculated campaign to destroy what she couldn't control. Her first move came just 3 days after she moved out, when my phone exploded with concerned messages from business associates. I just heard about your breakdown, one longtime colleague wrote. If you need professional help, I know someone discreet. Others referenced my supposed drinking problem or gambling addiction, stories she had strategically planted throughout our professional network. She was attempting to discredit me before I could damage her reputation further. I had anticipated this possibility. The day after our confrontation, I had sent brief, factual emails to key industry contacts. Due to irreconcilable differences, we are separating. I value our professional relationship and hope it continues without interruption. No details, no accusations, just enough information to inoculate them against her more dramatic claims. When character assassination failed to regain her footing, she attempted financial warfare. She maxed out our remaining joint credit cards, tried to withdraw from accounts I'd already secured, and even attempted to access my retirement funds by forging my signature. The financial protections I'd put in place functioned perfectly, leaving her grasping at resources that no longer existed. Her third strategy targeted my emotional vulnerabilities. She sent lengthy emails recounting happy memories, attaching photos from our early days together. Remember how you said you'd never felt so understood, she wrote. That connection was real. Everything else was just ambition clouding what matters most. When nostalgia failed, she pivoted to guilt. Your mother called me crying yesterday. She doesn't understand why you're doing this to our family. I maintained complete silence, my most powerful response. Each unanswered message, each thwarted attempt to manipulate me back into position demonstrated the fundamental shift in our power dynamic. I was no longer the stepping stone she could rely on. The promotion she'd been counting on was officially given to her colleague, someone with less experience but more authentic relationships within the industry. The announcement drove her to appear unannounced at my office, security escorting her to my door as she demanded to speak with me. You've ruined everything I've worked for, she hissed when I finally agreed to a brief meeting. Years of networking, relationship building, all destroyed because your ego couldn't handle the truth. I regarded her calmly. And what truth is that? That people use each other. That's how the world works. Everyone leverages relationships for advancement. I was just honest enough to admit it. She paced my office, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. You weren't supposed to hear that conversation. We could have continued benefiting each other. That's the difference between us, I replied. I never saw our marriage as a transaction. Her laugh was bitter. Then you're more naive than I thought. Every relationship is transactional. I just optimized mine. As she spoke, I recognized the emptiness at her core, the fundamental inability to comprehend genuine connection. In a strange way, it brought me peace. Her betrayal wasn't personal. She was simply incapable of authentic love. Her most desperate move came a week later. I arrived home to find her sitting in my living room, somehow having convinced the building manager to let her in. She wore the dress from our first anniversary, hairstyled the way I'd once said I loved. I've been offered a position in another city, she said without preamble. A lateral move, but it could become something more. Come with me. We can start fresh where no one knows us, or what happened. I studied her face, the practiced vulnerability, the calculated appeal to my sentimentality. You still don't understand. This isn't a negotiation or a temporary setback. It's over. Because of one comment, one moment of venting to my sister. Her voice rose in frustration. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're stressed. I walked to the door and held it open. Your sister called me yesterday. She told me you've been planning this move for months, that it was always your backup plan if things didn't work out here. Even now, you can't stop manipulating. The mask slipped completely then, her face contorting with genuine anger. You'll regret this. Without me, you'll go back to being the boring, predictable man I found 3 years ago. I made you interesting. As she stormed past me, I felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. I'd rather be boring than a stepping stone, I called after her retreating figure. At least stones have substance. The door closed behind her, and I knew with absolute certainty it was the last time I would ever see her. The stepping stone had not only shifted, it had become a mountain she could never again climb. 1 year later, I stood at the podium accepting an industry leadership award that once would have seemed impossibly out of reach. The journey from betrayed husband to respected innovator hadn't been easy, but it had been transformative in ways I never could have predicted when I first overheard those devastating words. The divorce had finalized 6 months earlier with surprising efficiency. Her attempts to claim alimony failed spectacularly when my lawyer presented evidence of her long-term strategy to use the marriage for career advancement. The judge had been particularly unimpressed by the recorded phone conversations with her sister, where she'd outlined plans to cash out once she reached a certain professional level. As I scanned the audience during my acceptance speech, I noticed several faces that had been fixtures in my married life. Colleagues who had initially believed her rumors about my supposed breakdown, but had since witnessed my steady rise. They'd seen how I channeled my pain into creating an innovative project management system that revolutionized our industry's approach to client relationships. Authentic connection creates sustainable success, I said into the microphone, the irony not lost on me. The very philosophy she had mocked had become the cornerstone of my professional renaissance. My system emphasized transparency and genuine relationship building over transactional networking, a direct response to the manipulation I'd experienced. After the ceremony, my former college roommate, the one who had unwittingly helped her secure her previous position, approached me. Have you heard the news? He asked, his expression caught between discomfort and vindication. I hadn't needed to ask what news he meant. Her downfall had been as methodical as her rise. The position in the new city had dissolved after just 3 months when her pattern of relationship exploitation became apparent. Without my connections to leverage, she'd attempted to fast-track relationships with new executives, but her tactics appeared transparent without the foundation of our marriage lending her credibility. Industry circles are smaller than most people realize. Word had spread about her methods, creating an invisible barrier to the opportunities she'd once taken for granted. The startup she'd planned using knowledge gleaned from my family's business had failed to secure funding when investors questioned her expertise and integrity. She reached out to me last week. My former roommate continued. Asked if I knew of any positions available. Said she'd be willing to start over at a lower level. The irony was palpable. She who had seen others as mere stepping stones was now searching for solid ground. I nodded but offered no response. Her story was no longer mine to carry. My own life had expanded in directions I couldn't have imagined during those dark days of discovery and planning. I'd reconnected with friends she had strategically removed from my life, rebuilt relationships with family members she had subtly criticized, and even begun dating someone who valued authenticity above advancement. Most surprisingly, I'd found genuine gratitude for the painful awakening her betrayal had triggered. Without that devastating moment of clarity, I might have continued indefinitely as the unwitting foundation for her ambitions, never recognizing my own potential independent of her manipulation. Later that evening, as I returned to my new home, a comfortable space that reflected my actual tastes rather than the showpiece she had insisted upon, I found an email from her sister. Unlike the manipulative messages I'd received during the separation, this one was startlingly honest. "She's living with me now," her sister wrote. "The industry she was so desperate to conquer has essentially blacklisted her. She doesn't understand why her methods stopped working. I think she genuinely can't comprehend relationships that aren't transactional. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know you were right to leave when you did." I closed the email without responding. Some stones are best left unturned, some bridges best left burned. The stepping stone she had taken for granted had become the solid foundation of my new life, while she had fallen into the chasm her own machinations had created. That night, I added a final entry to the journal I'd kept throughout this journey. "The greatest revenge against someone who saw you as a means to an end is to become your own magnificent beginning." I closed the book and placed it on a shelf, no longer needing its therapeutic outlet. The stone she had stepped on had not just shifted, it had risen to create a mountain she could never climb, while giving me a perspective I would never have discovered had I remained beneath her feet. In trying to use me as a stepping stone to greater heights, she had instead become a cautionary tale in my story of transformation. And for that, in the strangest way, I was finally at peace.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.